we'd like to bring to the stage someone who made this week possible from the get-go. Please welcome our district superintendent, Catherine Finger. She's going to share an original piece of writing for you. This is one of our biggest supporters, so please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, and good morning, and welcome to our very first annual Writers Week. This is a very exciting opportunity for us here at Grayslake Central High School, and hopefully we'll spread it to Grayslake North in the near future. And I would just like to take a moment to thank everyone who made today possible, and that is certainly our English department members. And I'm just going to ask all of our English department members here present, I know I saw Carl and others, would you please stand? Where are we? Come on, don't be shy. Thank you. Thank you. We could not have done this without you. Mr. Bolger in the back, our principal, Tom Kim, associate principal. Who else do we have there? Steve Gertz, athletic director. Well done. This is exciting. And we're so pleased to have such a wonderful lineup of authors, poets, editors, in-house authors, our student presenters. It's an extraordinarily exciting time for us. One of my very favorite, little bit obscure, Spanish writers was a man named Samuel Unamuno. And he had this passion for fiction, and he described it in Spanish as being the most important gift one person can give to another. And he made an interesting use of the word recreation in Spanish, which the verb is recrear, which is to recreate. But he said, a writer of fiction is a master of recreación, recreation, in two forms. One, it's a gift of sharing an escape, right? Getting away from your day-to-day lives, but also it's recreation in its finest. Recrear, to recreate. He believed that when you wrote, you recreated a piece of the world as you recreated your story. And as a reader, as you enjoy a good piece of fiction, you too recrear. You recreate what's going on through the stories you bring to the table. So it's that picture I have in my mind as we start our Writers' Week. All right, for myself, I've written a book that I call Alabaster Vases. It's about a female police chief, piece of fiction, and the antics that she gets into. There are five main characters in addition to the chief that readers see over time, and it's intended to be the first book of a series, and I have the second book started. I'm going to read a chapter today that I call Fight Club. And in this chapter, you see the police chief at a great bust. She's taking down a serial killer. And basically, long story short, she has a sidekick named Nick. He's a CIA operative. The killing, if you will, took place over several different states. So the FBI has become involved, as has her sidekick, Nick. So that's where the story takes us, right before they come to catch the killer. My lower abdomen was pressed up tight against the unyielding leather of my gun belt. I could feel a small roll of fat leaking out from the bottom of the Kevlar vest and circling my upper body. I started thinking it might not be a bad idea to up my 50 crunches a day routine now that I'm staring down the barrel of 50, or maybe just actually start doing them. The polyester fibers of my uniform melted into the cover of the Kevlar vest, and I don't care what the care tag reads, polyester does not breathe well. Nick's nudge snapped me back to full attention. FBI guy was by my side, on my left, and Nick was firmly crouched next to me on my right. Each clasped his favorite rifle aloft in a ready position. I held my trusty Glock in my right hand, entirely for show. Nick had already spotted my lead-tipped bat and knew right away where this was headed. If he had any objections, he was wisely keeping them to himself. Good call. I'd lost track of the number of well-trained guys standing ready behind us. All in all, it felt like power. Firepower, manpower, enough power to take this evil perp out. The entry team silently moved into place, shouldering their battering ram as if it were a lethal loaf of bread. The lead man gave me a thumbs up and waited for my nod to start the charge. There were no windows on the heavy wooden door, and I was confident we hadn't done anything yet to give ourselves away. The terrible pressure of knowing every second was life or death to the little girl within weighed heavily upon me. I looked around at the drawn weapons and nodded at the men flanking me. A calm descended upon me, and I took a moment to acknowledge it deep inside. I felt the presence of another firmly at my side. I lifted my head, gave the nod to the entry team, and let the war begin. Everything seemed to happen at once, like a well-choreographed, complicated dance. The moves went down exactly as we planned on the drive over, not exactly ideal training conditions. The door gave way on the first try, and I was glad I'd insisted on 6 guys instead of the usual 4. We had a need for speed. I was the first one into the room, FBI guy and Nick right behind me, dozens of cops and agents right behind them. The perp was in the back of the living room, up against the wall, kneeling. He was bent over a dirty mat on the floor, wearing a cheap Hawaiian shirt. In a split second, everything happened at once. My team and every other rifle in that room bore down on him. I shouldered my Glock and grabbed my lead-tipped bat out of my belt with my left hand, quickly shifting it into a strong, 2-handed grip. Time moved in slow motion for me. I could hear FBI guy's voice, ordering the perp to stop and put his hands on his head, but it sounded garbled to me. I ignored his voice and inched forward. I could see the form of my little girl lying on that dirty mat right before he put his hands on his head and turned around. A strong and terrifying sense of evil swirled around me as his eyes locked onto mine. I think I might have been okay if he hadn't have chosen to smile. He really should not have smiled at me. My legs grew firm as I tightened the grip on my bat and moved forward in one smooth motion, close enough to smell him. His eyes never left mine, and I could hear voices as if underwater and overhead warning me not to do what I was about to do. The perp's smile broadened at my approach. As if the smile wasn't taunting enough, he opened his mouth and spoke to me. "What took you so long, Chief?" I swung that bat up mid-height over my right shoulder and slammed it sideways into his wicked head in response. He crumpled instantly into a ragged heap, and I caught sight of the little girl on the mat before him and emitted an animal howl. I harnessed my bat, steadied myself, backed up one step, and then I hauled right off and kicked that perp as hard as I could. The first kick landed on his hip, and I'm pretty sure I heard a cracking sound. I backed up to gather momentum and hauled right off and kicked him again, this time in the ribs, supremely pleased to get the chance to use my steel-toed boots on him tonight. Someone gripped my right shoulder hard from behind me at the sickening yet satisfying crunch of his ribs under the toe of my boot, but I shook it off and knelt down swiftly by the little girl's side. 2 female medics were tending to her already, and both of them were crying. I knew my guys well enough to know they were crying too. I'd be crying soon too, but I needed to comfort her first. Samantha's eyes fluttered open. I gently picked up her hand and looked into her eyes, hoping to calm her, to soothe her. I softened my voice and spoke to her in low tones. "It's all right, little darling girl. You're safe with us now. We're here for you, Sammy. I'm here for you. No one's going to hurt you now. You're safe with us, Samantha." The sound of my voice calling her name seemed to reach her. I could feel her relaxing into me through the loosening of her grip on my hand. I stayed there with her, leaning away from her ever so slightly, mindful of her need for safety, for space maybe. She clutched my hand back to her chest and started to cry. I held her hand until the sedation took full effect and let the medics prep her to leave. I rose slowly to my feet and turned around, glad to see the perp had been removed. FBI guy and Nick stood there before me, exchanging nervous glances. I knew I'd be in trouble for today, possibly big trouble, given the size of the audience, but I didn't care. Worth it, I thought, as I cleared my voice and turned to face the music. And that concludes the chapter.